All right, so Walter, just a couple weeks ago out of Indiana, we had a case that went before the United States Supreme Court to do two things. One would be to make it to where you have to have a proper burial or cremation for the unborn baby for if an abortion is performed. And the other component was anti-discriminatory laws and whether or not the Supreme Court would hold that up as constitutional. So they decided, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the burial and or cremation was constitutional for Indiana to do that, and but they did not rule on the anti-discriminatory part. Their reasoning, from my understanding, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they didn't take that part up because it was not ripe enough for review. So on the one hand, we got, with the proper burial, kind of speaking towards the personhood, because why would you have a burial if it's not a person? So it's speaking towards the constructs of personhood. So it's a stepping stone towards overturning Roe. So that was a great component. The reason they didn't rule on the anti-discriminatory parts was because they want it to be more ripe for review. Only the Seventh Circuit, which Indiana is in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, only they had ruled on it. So they're looking to hear from another court of appeal before they take it before themselves for a vote. So that said, with all these states throughout the nation who are passing heartbeat bills, whether it's in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals or another, we already have two in the Sixth Circuit, but I say, hey, why not get as many states as we can, change the culture, get contradicting decisions from different Court of Appeals, and really challenge Roe versus Wade. In 1972 and up and coming for Roe versus Wade, the states were applying pressure, and the courts are supposed to interpret the law and not supposed to apply that political pressure. But they have from the culture before, and for the wrong reasons, and we got our unconstitutional Roe and Doe out of that. So with that said, I believe we need to help to expand that culture of life to help to overturn Roe, and just having more states, more Court of Appeal rulings would only help. Does that make sense to you?
Right. The Supreme Court doesn't have to take hardly any cases that come before it. General rule is they have complete control over their own docket. And a number of considerations go into deciding whether or not to take particular cases. And one of them is the importance of the issue, and another is whether there's a conflict in the lower court. So in the case of, it mentioned where there was a ban on abortions on the basis of race, sex, or disability, there was no conflict. The case had come up to the first time to a Court of Appeals. There was that one ruling, and normally the Supreme Court likes to let things percolate, is the way they phrase it, in the lower courts, so that they don't rush to make a hasty decision without having the benefit of lots of different lower court opinions weighing in on an issue. So yes, anytime you have a wave of laws being passed on a particular topic, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be abortion, it makes it more likely that the Supreme Court is going to say, this seems to be something that really needs to be addressed. Unless they're happy with the way all the lower courts are handling it and there's no conflict, in which case they can just let it go. But even then, sometimes, if there's a whole wave of lower courts addressing an issue, they may say it's time for us to weigh in. After all, we're the top of the pyramid. We're supposed to not just leave it to the lower courts to decide this. So yes, right. The more pro-life legislation gets passed of whatever kind, the more pressure, invitation, however you want to put it, it puts to the Supreme Court saying, may it please the court, you need to address this issue.
Right. So the more states that pass the heartbeat bills, the better the chance that we can tell the courts that we want to see Roe go.
Same thing happened with partial birth abortion. It was a wave across the country, and lower courts were striking it down on a regular basis. In fact, the Supreme Court struck one down out of Nebraska. But the wave was still there. The Congress passed one too, and then the Supreme Court finally stepped in and upheld the law. And so ideally, with heartbeat or whatever, and there's a whole bunch of abortion laws that are out there now. You hope that the Supreme Court will look and say, we really need to limit the harm that we are imposing on the states and on the people with our Roe versus Wade decision, which really handcuffs the ability of states to pass common sense, very popular, very sensible, modest, or aggressive, or restrained limits on abortion.
Very good.